Thank you very much, and in particular, thank you for the guy. I've reached the age where it's much more important to be a guy than to be important. But what I wanted to talk to you about today, now, is something which is not necessarily the sexiest of the argument, which is Europe. Normally, Europe is one of those things that you realize how important it is when it's not there, but when you do not have it, when you have it, you tend to take it for granted. And in the next 10 minutes of my impulse statement, and then in the following 10 minutes with Annet, I'll try to change your views about that. Typically, people say that in the next couple of years, all societies have found that the COVID and the war, in particular for those who are closely affected like us, have improved their ability to be resilient, have improved their ability to adjust. I think for Europe, the COVID and the war has been a major tectonic shift, I like to say. And let me take 4 arguments in turn, and let's see if you agree or disagree with me. Argument number 1 is time, or in particular, time of the response. Europe was notoriously known for being slow. Everybody thought that it took long for Europe to respond. And I must confess, in the past, we may have given some argument to that evidence, like, for example, it took us 4 or 5 years to come back from the financial crisis. But after that, I think we have learned from the financial crisis a number of lessons, in particular one that Martin was mentioning a minute before: you don't have to disillude people. And when it came both COVID and the war, the speed at which we responded was amazingly different. The speed with which we responded in COVID was about 4 or 5 weeks, and the speed with which we responded during the war was about 4 or 5 hours from the invasion. There was already a European plan to respond. So the first thing which definitely has changed for the better for Europe is time. The second, and this I think is quite crucial, is the relationship with you, with the people, with your representative, both the representative in the democratic institutions, but also the representative in the financial market. The plan for Europe, the Next Generation EU, to which Steffi referred, as we all know, is not made with public money, is not made with taxes. It is made by Europe issuing bonds on the financial markets and the financial operators buying those bonds. What the financial operators are buying is a project, are values. They are buying the fact that in the next 30 years, Europe will develop, will build back better, and will be able to pay back. What the financial market have said to our issuance till now, basically we normally issue the 4th Monday of the month, and basically every time we issue, we have had oversubscription of about 10 times, sometimes 14, sometimes 6, sometimes 8, but on average, about 10 times. And if you want the ultimate proof of what I'm saying, that people don't buy bonds, but they buy the project and the value, you may have noticed that a couple of months ago, we issued bonds, which is called macro-financial assistance for Ukraine. So basically, we issued bonds for Ukraine, and we gave the money to Ukraine, and we have now a big macro-financial assistance project for 2023. We are the first jurisdiction in the world to commit, and we are the first jurisdiction in the world to disburse, and this is done through financial markets. And by being through financial markets, this means we are in complete and constant and continuous touch with the people, with the financial markets, and we can, in a way, assess the market value of our propositions. Obviously, someone who buys a bond for macro-financial assistance to Ukraine, what he's buying is the concept of peace. He's buying the fact that we'll be able to restore peace, and we will be able to make that place good and back again. Third point is, yesterday someone here said it's important to have a sense of purpose always in whatever you are doing. I think it was Maya speaking here yesterday afternoon. Well, I think what Europe did all through the crisis was to keep the sense of purpose of the fact that the planet, as we have used it and consumed it till now, cannot stand us anymore. I mean, it's more than obvious that if we continue for the next 20, 30 years, even less, 10 years, to misuse or use the planet as we have done till now, it will not work. So the Green Deal. The European Green Deal has been a phenomenal point of attraction of interest for Europe and for the world. Let me give you a few numbers, and let me give you a 2 minutes recall of what happened. 2015, COP in Paris, everybody agreed that we need to make effort to reduce the increase of temperature to 1.5 degrees, no more. 3 months later, the American government, Trump president, decides that's not good enough. They withdraw from the COP agreement. Europe remains alone. Look at the numbers. Europe pollutes 9% of the world pollution, China 30%, US 20%. When people of Europe ask us to do something for the planet, they don't mean to do something for the 9%. They mean to do something, some magic, something by which the remaining 91, of which 50 is between China and US, gets down. And there, what we had to do was to try to find some type of regulation that applies, quote unquote, applies also to those who are not de jure under our jurisdiction. We came up with taxonomy, which is of course something which is very attractive for the investors in the world and for the financial market in the world. And it was actually the only way to get up to make sure that not only the 9% but the 91. Why could we do it? Because we had the sense of purpose that was mentioned yesterday. Because in spite of all the calls, we never let go on the Green Deal. Because you, the kids of Europe, those that will have a pension in 2070, you know very well that your pension in 2070 will either be paid because you have invested in green assets or will not be paid. If any of your pension funds invest on something which is not green, forget that you have a pension in 2070. You may have a pension in 5 years, in 10 years, but certainly not in the long run. And I think keeping strong on that has worked. It took some act of courage. The most famous one is probably the CBAM. Who, hands up, at the beginning of 2022, thought the CBAM would work? Probably none in this room and very few people around. But having had that courage of bringing the CBAM to the center was a way to, as I said, include the rest of the world on a sense of purpose. And it goes from big things like CBAM to small things, like you may have heard the LED light bulbs that we have provided to Ukraine. We calculated that if the whole Ukrainian population substitutes 2 bulbs to old bulbs, so to speak, to incandescent bulb with LED light bulb, we would save energy of about 1 small nuclear power. We did that. In 2-3 months, we went out, we procured the LED light bulb, they were shipped to Ukraine, the change was happened, and the consumption went down. So from very big CBAM taxonomy to very small LED light bulb, but all the efforts having a sense of purpose that people could understand. And the fourth point, which I want to get across, is that in order to do that, what we needed to do was to go well beyond the issue of regulation. Regulation is, of course, something necessary. Yesterday was discussed. It could be discussed. It could be simplified. Many things can be done to regulation. There is a regulation for, and there is a regulation against. Something we have tried to make conducive regulation to investment as much as possible. But it became very clear at some point that regulation per se was not enough. And Europe needed to venture into areas of economic policies that did not venture before, but where had we not ventured, that's the cost of not doing, had we not ventured, it would have been a disaster. The most obvious and the most successful one was the procurement of vaccine. At some point, we all needed vaccine. We were all closed at home. A vaccine which has the cost of $500,000 in a restaurant where we couldn't go, but the problem was to procure them. We said, okay, if member states go and procure on their own, there will be an incredible price pressure, and we will never be able to make sure that the vaccine get to the European population and the rest of the world, because we are the biggest donor of vaccine in the rest of the world, in an orderly manner. So we decided to procure vaccines all together. We procured 4.3 billion vaccine, of which about 1 billion something went to the rest of the world. The rest was used in Europe. All European citizens had access to vaccine, no matter where they were. And I think this was a phenomenal success. But not only this one. We have done, for example, look in the area of gas, which is obviously an area which now worries us a lot. But we have done some initiatives like storages, and there are instances of joint storages between countries. Or we have done other initiatives, like, for example, the price cap. Again, hands up. How many of you thought Europe would have been able to argue for a price cap? We did. We did argue for a price cap, and at least till now, and looking at the results of the market, the price cap worked. But my last two concluding comments before going to the questions. One, when we did all of that, we realized that very often in the discussion with member states was a question not only of having a sense of purpose, not only of having a regulation, not only of having a direction where to go, but it was a question to have a support, to have help. How Steffi introduced me, my DG is a DG that, Director General, that supports member states in their reform efforts. Member states want to reform. Everybody understands that we need to reform. Everybody understands that the world tomorrow will be very different from today. Problem is that reforms are very difficult to do, because reforms have an immediate cost and a later on benefit, and is squaring the difficult, in particular political equation between the immediate cost and the long-term benefit that we can help. And that's what Europe has been doing and has been helping. So I'll stop here, Annet, and I'm in your hands for the rest of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really, it's very impressive to hear in 10 minutes what all has been achieved in the past years. And yes, indeed, I would like to focus a bit more on what you are actually focusing on with the Director General reform. And as you already said, Europe is known for regulations. Europe is known for big bags of money. But Europe is much less known for building skills. And actually, that is the very important third corner of the triangle, yes, to make sure that that money is well spent. And that's what your DG is all about. And if I look at what you're all doing, your purpose is to improve the quality of public administration, and also to make sure that all the recovery and resilience plans have the right quality. And how you do it is that memberships can ask for help for projects, and you provide the expertise. And hopefully, in that sense, they become better over time. And I've been looking at the different projects you've been doing, and it's an amazing array of projects, going from financial literacy in Austria, health system reform in Slovenia, better integrate immigrants in Italy, deploying AI at the Belgium Trade Agency, a national energy and climate plan in Greece, and I can go on and on. So there's a lot of bits and pieces where we as Europe are improving. And my first question to you is, so there's many flowers which bloom with all your projects, and together, hopefully, they will give a nice, beautiful, biodiverse meadow. But at the same time, we know that one of the big challenges of Europe is to become more uniform, to do things more in the same way, and to be less fragmented. So in the sense of how can Europe, if you think, the big projects like the Green Deal, like the European defense and other things, are you not being too much bottom-up? And should you not be more top-down in making sure that we in Europe have the right skills and practices?
It's an eternal dilemma in Europe between being bottom-up and top-down. You would expect a commission official, a high-ranking commission official, to come here and speak about the virtues of top-down. We know better in Brussels, now we tell you what you should do in München or in Gothenburg. In reality, I must confess, I am a big fan of the bottom-up for a simple reason, because member states, when they do bottom-up, they put the most important thing, which is commitment and ownership. When a member state like Netherlands comes to us and says, we would like to do a project on using artificial intelligence at the customs, so to be sure then we can truly enforce a circular economy and know where the goods come from and where the goods go. Or when another country comes to you, like Greece, summer 2021, and says, we have huge fire in Evia, can you help us? And we say to them, yes, we can help you with the fire in Evia, but we do not only want to extinguish the fire. What we want to do is to build with you a ministry for crisis so that next summer there will be no fires. And indeed, in summer 2022, basically Greece was one of the few countries without fire, not by chance, but because the forests were cleaned in the spring, because the roads to access were made in February and March and all of that. So I think that the needs, when you have a member states coming up to Brussels and asking something, they bring the most important thing, which is the ownership and the commitment. Then what we need to bring, and that's the job I try to do, what we need to bring is what you are saying, the coherence with the European project. So AI, circular economy in Netherlands, extremely coherent. Green Deal, extinguishing the fires, and then creating a minister to prevent and anticipate, also extremely coherent. I mean, not to have a fire, it's an extremely profitable activity. So this is the job. But I think in the last few years we have seen a lot of bottom-up, and it really worked very well.
Yeah, and so it's an on-demand approach. So countries come to you and ask for projects. But at the same time, we had the big game changer in Europe, because since last year, you can put conditions on projects. In order to get the money, you have to fill certain conditions with good governance. And so this whole balance between pull, countries asking for help, and push, how is that changing, and how does that affect you?
Of course, with the Next Generation EU, we changed the modality of the use of the big bag of money, as you said, which is not that big. I mean, it's big when it goes to a country, but compared to the GDP of Europe, it's only about 1%. But still, it's big when you look at that. And well, we changed the modality. We pay on performance. It's performance related, full stop. There is nothing to say. Member states commit in advance on what they need to do, and then they tell us, we think we have done it or not done it. If they have not done it, they don't request the money. If they think they have done it, they claim they have done it. There is a portal, they go on the portal, they show what we have done, and then we judge. So it's completely performance related. This, of course, as an economist, I would say, has made a very incentive compatible mechanism, because obviously there is a big price.
Did you see a rise in demands since these conditions were?
Of course, it's very, very clear that there has been a major rise in demand, and it's very, very clear that it works better. But also, and this is the point where I want to come on push and pull, in reality, we also moved somewhat out of the two old, if you pardon me, categories of push and pull. And we are much more in a co-creation category. Because of course, we do want to disburse this money. We have gone on the markets. The markets have given us money, as I was saying. They've given us money because they believed in the project. And therefore, there is a sort of a co-creation with member states, which I think is probably one of the novelties of the last few years.
Yeah. So my final question. So personally, I believe that building these soft skills of good management and competences in Europe is one of the most important factors. It's not talked about a lot. And if you compare to China, where it's done very much top-down, state-driven, or in the US, where the market basically plays the main role. You have seen over the years you worked in DT reform so many countries and so many practices. In order for Europe to become really competitive against China, against US, what do you think are the key skills and the key things we as Europe should have?
Look, I think there are 2, 3 things, but the first one, it may surprise you, and in particular, it may surprise those of you of my generation. I mean, when I was at university, we spent years and months discussing whether you need more states or more market. And the pendulum between state and market has swung in various directions for many years. But what is true is that we saw it during the crisis, the COVID crisis and the war crisis, is that the role of the public administration cannot be neglected. And there are more and more demands going on public administrations. And on the supply side, the public administration in the last 10, 20 years have suffered a number of problems of, let's say, reduction of people that wanted to go there, outsourcing of tasks. So there is currently a bit of a mismatch between what is demanded on public administration and what public administration are able to do. How do you solve that mismatch? I think learning from best practices, because in every country and in Europe, a fortiori, you always find some extremely good public administration. We are putting together mechanisms. For example, we have created a program which allows the exchange of public officials between people, a bit like Erasmus, but 30 years later, and for public officials and not for students. So I think we can learn one another, the public administration can learn one another how to get better. And actually, member states working together is probably the biggest and most important element for the success of Europe. There is no single country, no matter how small, that does not have a center of excellence. And if you look in Europe, it's very clear what we need to do. And then the very last point, I think, for Europe, what we saw the hard way was how bad it was to have a dependence. COVID came, we had a dependence on health instrument from Far East Asia and China. Then came the war, we had a dependence for energy. I think the construction of a strategic autonomy is probably one of the most important things for European competitiveness in the future.
Thank you so much. I think what you're describing here is coming back to the Green Deal. The biodiversity of Europe is actually one of our strengths, and you're helping to make it really stay resilient. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.